So the big rumour is that Ferrari have improved their SF-25 by over 1.5 seconds over last year's SF-24. Now that's not the only number that I have seen floating around the internet. I've seen they've improved by 1 second, I've seen it improve by half a second, and this video is all about, in a sense, debunking what you're hearing and reading online, because it has not come from, number one, a reputable source, particularly on that aspect. It's all about clickbait. And yes, I am doing a clickbaity video here myself, but it's more about debunking the rubbish that you hear online. And there's a couple of reasons behind why. Now, there's two avenues to take this 1 second advantage that they found from year 2024 to 2025, and it's this. Number one, how are you quantifying this? Is this from sim data? Well, we all know sim data is less than a reliable tool in the ground effect error. And then the second and more important aspect of this lap time gain is, what are you measuring this up against? Because this is what is getting everyone excited. They found 1.5 seconds. Oh my god, amazing. But it's actually something which isn't really something to be getting excited about here. It's because, are you just basing it off of last year's car and not taking into account what all of the other rivals of Ferrari are doing? Because if you're doing it off the SF-24 at the end of last year, what were they? 2/10 on average in qualifying slower than the McLaren, and they finished some 10 plus seconds behind them in the last race in Abu Dhabi. So if they find only a second and McLaren find a second as well, then there is that status quo where nobody has moved, and then Ferrari's magical 1 second becomes almost irrelevant. So that is the aspect you have to take into consideration when reading these news articles. Now, of course, there is one thing I want to discuss just before we go into the main portion of this video, and it's the fact that I'm going out to Maranello to film the unveiling of the SF-25, and I'm also running a competition, and here are all the details you need. Now, of course, I am myself going to be going out to Maranello in February to film the unveiling of the 2025 Ferrari car. And I'm going to be running a competition for all my subscribers on the channel. And what you are in the chance of winning simply is, hopefully, if I can get Hamilton or Leclerc or both of them to sign this limited edition Monza livery from last year t-shirt. And yeah, basically all you've got to do is be subscribed when that video is unveiled in February of the new 2025 car. All you have to do is leave a like in the video and leave a comment, and then the winner will be put into the description of that video a week afterwards. So yeah, be on the lookout for that as and when it happens. But of course, with the huge changes that Ferrari have been making over the winter, it is a more than reasonable figure, I believe personally, to latch onto here would be the half a second, or in a region of half a second to 3/4 of a second lap time gain advantage from one year to the next. And I personally am doing that in the sense of quantifying it over the SF-24. And that would be, I think personally, quite a good chunk of lap time to find over a winter period. And a lot of this lap time gain will of course have come from the front suspension geometry change, not only that but the overall layout, going from a push rod to pull rod. And not only that, there's of course going to be refinement throughout the SF-25, and as we all know, 99% will not have been carried over from last year into this year. So even though we're seeing huge changes up and down the whole of the SF-25, everything has to work in harmony with one another, and that is essentially what they will be doing. Now, just to quickly go back around to the issue of their rivals. Now, as I mentioned, you can find, for example, 0.3 of a second over 24 to 25. But what, for example, happens if Mercedes, who were a mile behind, find 1.5? Well, that means they're going to leapfrog Ferrari in the beginning of the season. And that really accounts for all of the big four teams that we, of course, will expect Ferrari to be challenging with. So that is why I say these numbers are really not something to latch onto, to totally believe, because as I've said, it's come from a less than reputable source. But one thing and one article that spoke about this over on Twitter is a very reputable one, and this particular person is very much got connections within Formula One and also within Ferrari, I believe, and they made a good point here. And they said they've heard that it's more than likely a half a second that they found, but of course none of this is quantifiable until this car hits the track in pre-season testing. That is when we will fully, and Ferrari of course more importantly, will fully start to understand whether they've found that gain that they saw in the wind tunnel, or whether they've, sometimes this can happen, found even more time when you actually put it out onto the real world on a track, or on other occasions it can be less than what the wind tunnel is saying. And that is the tricky aspect of this ground effect error. A simulation of how your car is being designed and how you've manufactured may say one thing, but in reality and in the real world it can be something completely different. And that is the biggest pitfall that we have in the ground effect error. It's what we saw happen to Mercedes over the first 2 years of this era. They had a concept which should on paper and in all of their calculations have blown the field away. But of course we all know what happened with those zero pod concepts. The car was bouncing and there was a huge disconnection throughout the car for those first 2 years, until they eventually ditched it in 2024 and went for a more conventional side-pod layout design from the beginning. So yeah, there is a lot here of things to be excited about, because of course every team is going to be finding lap time gains, and I'm hopeful Ferrari, for their sake and for all the fans of both drivers and team here, these rumoured numbers actually have some substance to them. And I think what Ferrari should hopefully be aiming for, and the fans hoping for here, is basically somewhere between that half a second and 1 second of lap time improvement. That should keep them in the ballpark with the likes of McLaren here and Red Bull, because I'm sure they're going to be finding a lot of lap time as we head into the winter, as we head into pre-season testing. And of course we're not really going to know until we hit the track and we hit qualifying in Melbourne at the beginning of March. Anyway guys, I am going to wrap the video up here. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, do leave a like on the video down below. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here, and of course I will see you all probably with a video or so more before I actually head off to Maranello on the 18th or 19th to film the new SF-25. Anyway guys, I'll see you all later with another Formula 1 video. See you soon.